So we actually surveyed over 400 people and asked them some of the key differences between Queen Creek and Gilbert, and ultimately which city they thought was best. And I am going to share the winner at the end of this video. But the main reason we actually even did the survey is because a lot of times I will get a call from someone relocating to the area and they're like, hey, Courtney, we've really narrowed down our search. We're looking at just Queen Creek and Gilbert. And when I ask, what's the draw to these two specific cities, the answer is always usually very similar. People are like, hey, well, I was doing research. I was looking at school rankings and crime rates and just things to do in general. And these two cities really seem to check a lot of our boxes. And on paper, when you compare two of these cities, I can definitely see that there are a lot of similarities and there's similar draws that bring people into both of these areas, but there's also some stark differences as well. And you want to know about some of these things before you actually, move here, or definitely before buying a home in either of these cities. I'm Courtney Strzelczyk. I'm a local real estate agent here in the East Valley. And if you have any input on either of these cities, I would love to hear it in the comments. I want to be a resource for people that are moving or considering this area, and that definitely helps just give some insight. But anyway, one of the first things that came up on the survey is someone actually stated Queen Creek is what Gilbert was 15 years ago. And there's definitely some truth to this. Gilbert is a pretty established city or town technically, but Queen Creek is very, very new. I mean, really in the past 10 to 12 years, or even you could say since COVID, the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen crazy growth in this city. I mean, the city used to be a couple thousand people and now it's about 85,000. But Gilbert, on the other hand, is considerably bigger. It's 290,000 people, so it's almost 3.5 times the size of Queen Creek. And I don't think a lot of people actually know this, even people that live here in town. With Gilbert being a more established town and an older town, there are some things that come with that. First off, the neighborhoods, most of the neighborhoods are going to be older. Queen Creek definitely has a lot more new construction. And with older or more established neighborhoods, you also have a lot more mature vegetation. So it does feel much more shaded, a lot greener. Gilbert's also going to have a lot more options for, shopping and dining. Of course, we have the Heritage District or our downtown area. There's Agritopia. We have a huge shopping mall, Santan Village, and there's a whole bunch of other smaller strip malls and so forth, throughout the city. Queen Creek definitely doesn't have as much, but I will say in the past handful of years, the infrastructure has definitely grown a lot. We have the Queen Creek Marketplace, which is really their center area of shopping. They're calling it, or they're trying to call it, a downtown area. I would say it feels more like a city center than downtown area, but either way, there is a lot of things that are coming to this area, restaurants, things to do. There's a huge movie theater. Of course, you have Costco and Trader Joe's, all that stuff. Now, a complaint that did come up a few times in the survey is a lot of the things that are coming to Queen Creek are going to be more chain options, where Gilbert has more mom and pop options or more local restaurants. Now, I will say, even though this came up in the survey, Gilbert still does have quite a few chains, but with Gilbert being bigger, more established, you do have more locally owned spots or unique spots, if you will. Another thing that came up in the survey is that there's not really nightlife in Queen Creek, and if you want some nightlife, you really have to go to Gilbert. Another thing to keep in mind too, if you live in Queen Creek and when you want nightlife, you can make the drive or the Uber 20 minutes and then you'll have a lot more options too. Now, a huge thing that came up in the survey why people actually chose Queen Creek over Gilbert was that Queen Creek just had more of this quiet, slow pace of life. And I definitely agree with it. First off, you have the Santan Regional Park right there. So if you want to go hiking or mountain biking or just watch the sunset view over the mountains, you have that right at your doorstep. There are also some local spots like Schnepp's Farm, Olive Mill, that definitely gives it this almost country-like feel to the city. Queen Creek does have this romantic rural feel, but it's funny because you also have a lot of conveniences at your doorstep. You could be shopping at Costco, you pull out and go around a corner, and then there's horse farms right off the main strip. But the number one complaint about living in Queen Creek is actually the traffic. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, wait, you just said Queen Creek had this rural feel. Why would the biggest issue be traffic? Okay, hear me out. So remember how I said Queen Creek grew really, really quickly. A lot of people moved there in a very short amount of time, and the road infrastructure just was not there to support it. So the main problem is there's not a major freeway that goes in and out of Queen Creek. You have the 24, which is kind of a smaller freeway. That's going to be the closest, but really the main major freeway is 202, and that's several miles away from Queen Creek. So you're on these surface streets for a really long time. And if it's rush hour or maybe school's just getting off, I mean, those surface streets can get really backed up, and you can easily be at the same, traffic light for multiple cycles. Now, Gilbert can get backed up a little bit, particularly if there's construction, but for the most part, it's pretty fluid. You aren't getting in that gridlock that you will see in Queen Creek. But if you're working in Queen Creek or close by, or maybe you work remotely from home and you don't have to commute really far, it's probably not going to be as big of a deal. I know a lot of people that live down there learn how to work around some of those rush hour times when traffic gets pretty bad. However, if you're working in Tempe or Scottsdale, God forbid Phoenix, it's going to be a really, really long drive. And sometimes those, the times on Google Maps during rush hour are not very accurate. It can take you a lot longer, actually. So if you are going to be making that long commute, I would recommend, just practicing that drive a few times before you commit to that location to make sure, it will work for you. Another huge thing that came up on the survey was cost of living. And a lot of people were selecting Queen Creek as being more affordable. I don't necessarily agree with this, and I'm going to explain why. Now, when you're looking at things like groceries, gas, utilities, taxes, Queen Creek and Gilbert are going to be pretty comparable with one another. Now, what people are referring to more so is the cost of homes. Now, when people say Queen Creek is more affordable than Gilbert, there are some nuances with that. So first off, if you had the same exact house, same square footage, lot size upgrades in both Queen Creek and Gilbert, it is going to be more expensive in Gilbert. But the interesting thing is the median sales price in Queen Creek is actually higher than a lot of parts of Gilbert. And this is the reason for this. So Gilbert has a lot more options or variety of homes. You're gonna find townhomes, condos, luxury listings, and everything in between. Now, Queen Creek is primarily going to just be single family homes, and there is a wide range of prices. I mean, we have some that are closer to 400,000 all the way. I think there's one that's 18 million right now in the market. However, there are a ton of homes priced between $600,000 to $800,000 in Queen Creek. So that's going to bring the median sales price up. I also find when people are saying that Queen Creek is much more affordable, they're actually referring to its neighbor city, Santan Valley. And I will say Santan Valley definitely has a lot more options in that under that $400,000 range even, but that is not Queen Creek, that's Santan Valley. Those cities just tend to get lumped together quite a bit. And speaking of homes, neighborhoods and homes were a very common topic that came up in the survey. And a lot of people made an interesting point that if you want new construction or if you want a newer home, you're going to have a lot better luck in Queen Creek because it's a newer city. And this is absolutely right. There's a lot more new developments happening in Queen Creek right now. There's a few in Gilbert, just not that many. So if you're trying to take advantage of, builder incentives, or maybe you just want a newer house that doesn't need a lot of maintenance, you are for sure going to find more options in Queen Creek. Another thing that came up was lot size. There are going to be more options for larger lots in Queen Creek, particularly if you're looking for something like a half acre to a full acre, and it is also going to be less expensive. As a rule of thumb in Phoenix Metro, the further on the outskirts of the metro area you get, it usually is a little bit cheaper for land. There are some exceptions to that, but in this case, when we're comparing Gilbert to Queen Creek, we can definitely see that. However, on the flip side, a lot of people were complaining about the HOAs in Queen Creek, saying that they were a lot stricter and more of a nuisance to deal with. And there is actually a reason for this. So in Queen Creek, we have a lot more master planned communities. So these beautiful neighborhoods with beautiful amenities, pools, clubhouses. And yes, there are some neighborhoods like this in Gilbert, but not quite as many. Now, when you have a master plan community with nicer and more amenities, usually comes with a higher price tag. You're usually paying a little bit more a month, and you also usually have slightly stricter rules. Now, keep in mind, this is not a hard, fast rule. You can find all types of HOAs in both cities, but generally, particularly in the north part of Gilbert, you have more neighborhoods, first off, that don't have HOAs, and then that are going to be a little bit more lenient or less expensive. You might find a lot more options between $30 and $50 instead of $100 to $150. Now, when we took the poll asking everyone in the survey if they preferred Gilbert or Queen Creek, Gilbert was the clear winner, and it was actually over 75% chose Gilbert. Now, there probably was a little bit of a bias in this poll because we did have more residents from Gilbert voting, so just keep that in mind. Really, the main complaint that we saw over and over again was just that Queen Creek's further outside, and with the traffic, it can make it very difficult to commute. That was the primary reason why people actually chose Gilbert over Queen Creek. So if you do have to commute, definitely do your homework and make sure you feel comfortable with that. And if you don't have to commute, I would definitely consider Queen Creek. There's definitely a reason why it's grown so much in such a short amount of time. Now, the other city people often compare with Gilbert is Chandler. So if that is another city that you are considering, definitely watch this video right here where I compare Chandler and Gilbert. Thank you so much for your time and have a fantastic day.